Hi, this is Grant Johnson, and we're here at Inspire 2017 in wonderful Nashville, Tennessee. And with me today, my guest is Brian Solis. He's a principal analyst at Altimeter Group, and he's also a digital anthropologist and a futurist. And he's going to join me today. We're going to talk about the future of digital transformation, customer experience, and technology. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Grant. It's a pleasure.
You know, in my role as CMO at Kofax, I get the opportunity to connect directly with customers. That's my favorite part. Sitting in meetings is not, and that's probably understandable. And one of the major challenges I find, Brian, for organizations in digital transformation is, where do they start? They need a plan to create the organizational readiness for change. And so I'd love to talk to you today about where digital transformation is heading and what organizations can do about it.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just one of the interesting things about that in terms of digital transformation is, I don't know where it starts, to be honest with you, or I don't know that there is a designated place for it to start or a designated thing to do. In my research, I found that digital transformation is often something that starts in any pocket of the organization. It can start from anywhere for any reason. Most often I had found that CMOs were kicking off a lot of very interesting digital transformation projects as a way of trying to get in front of the digital customer. And in learning that the digital customer was so different than the traditional customer, they had to make a lot of investments in new technologies, but also supporting processes and systems and policies to try to implement new things that were so different. At the same time, I've seen IT and the CIO lead a lot of digital transformation initiatives as a way of just shifting infrastructure to the cloud and mobile, et cetera. But I've also seen some of the most obscure places for digital transformation in that human resources, for example, and having challenges in attracting millennial talent and going through the whole employee prospect journey, realizing, wow, our forms and surveys don't even load on mobile phones. we have to rethink this whole thing. But I don't know, what do you see most often?
Yeah, I think actually that's great. I see it does happen a lot of times. It'll be sort of a mandate, we need to do something about it, but the organization or the function that actually starts to do something about it, it depends. At Kofax, we felt that to get closer to the customer, we needed to follow that journey from each step, and we had to cross-functionally align to who touches the customer when. Instead of just handing it off and saying good luck, we need to see what happens. And so that helped us. What do we all get a lot of information. I look at research as you do, Brian, and digital transformation it's in the vernacular. But what's the key catalyst to getting organizations to do something?
It comes back to your last question as well, is what do you do? And I think that the most successful digital transformation implementations I've seen have been when digital transformation has a purpose. What are we trying to do and why? Whether it's trying to get in front of the digital customer or the employee, that has to have a reason, right? People have to have something within the organization to rally behind. Otherwise, it just becomes a technology story. And I think what I've seen historically with organizational investment in new technology, because there's always new technology, is that we lean on it a little bit too much. In fact, the last 30, 40 years with technology inside of the organization, we've gotten further and further away from the customer. And so that, I think, with digital transformation, we have an opportunity to use technology as a way to become more human again, to get in front of the customer in very interesting and compelling and engaging in personal ways. So I think as long as digital transformation has that purpose, and I've seen that purpose most often around customer experience, simply because you either are getting the customer or you're not getting the customer, and these are really disruptive times. But at the same time, to your point around cross-functional engagement, this is a point of criticality that I want to emphasize, and that is, you can't hand off any aspect of the customer experience anymore because they're too connected, they're too sophisticated, they're too informed, and they have a different set of expectations. So from a cross-functional standpoint, you have an opportunity to actually reimagine the infrastructure of how a business operates. And I think that's what I'm so excited about, is that digital transformation might start as one thing, but end up changing the entire business as a result. And I'm sure in your work you see all kinds of different implementations, but I would love to hear what's excited you the most.
Well, I think you hit on it. It's a spark. It starts somewhere, it's a catalyst, and it sort of builds. And I've often been asked, who's responsible for customer experience? And the answer the wrong answer is this department or that department. It's everybody's responsible. Every contact matters. It's some way it shapes that experience for the customer positively or negatively. And as you said, Brian, if you don't serve the customer, someone else will. So you need to figure out how to get your organization behind the mandate of digital transformation. Talk to me a little bit, if you could, Brian. What doesn't resonate with customers today? What doesn't work?
I think that customers, you have different types of customers that are really starting to surface. What they all share is this desire to have their needs met right now, and usually on a mobile device. I've studied with Google actually quite a bit over the last 2.5 years how people are making decisions, and we explicitly looked at what questions they're asking and what devices that they're using and where are they going. And I'll tell you, the entire premise of the customer journey is about to go through radical disruption, in that the level of patience that people have is so thin and narrow now, simply because of the nature of a relationship with the phone that we have. I don't even know why I'm calling it a phone. I don't think I use it to call people anymore. That, for example, we found 90% of people, when they go to make a decision, they go for their mobile device, and 90% have zero brand interest when they go to make that decision. They're simply using the phone to ask a question, and then the journey begins. It's the opposite of what we've thought with the traditional funnel. And then 73% will make a decision with the company that was most useful in those what they call micro moments.
Right.
And it's interesting because what they define as useful was I able to get information I needed in this moment on this device in a way that's intuitive to how I use the device? And most companies are not ready for that. And I know this is a long-winded answer, but you can start anywhere to do anything to meet the needs of what people have, and what that basic need is simply, I need an answer. It's just how you deliver that answer and where is the hard part. Because I think we're so used to saying, well, I've got a web page for you, but that's the number one thing a consumer doesn't want, is a web page. They want to be able to get that answer. They want to watch a video. They want to watch something that personally delivers that information to them where they're at.
Yeah, right at the moment it matters most. You call it micro moments. We've called it mobile moments. Mm-hmm. And because so many of our customers and our customers' customers are connected through that smart device, and that's, as you say, Brian, that's where they want everything to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then they're going to get mad pretty quick and go elsewhere. Don't want that to happen. What is the gap that knowing that it's a customer-driven era, and that they are so demanding, they all want it now, and they're not going to have patience. So what's the gap between what the customers are demanding and what companies are able to provide?
Wow,
Do I have a week?
Yeah, because I would love to hear your take on this as well. I mean, you're on the front lines. What I've seen, boy, well, this is why I spend a lot of time in social science, is that there's no easy answer to this question. I don't think that any executive, will say, hey, Brian, let me tell you a secret. We don't really care about our customers. But they don't act like they care about their customers, and that's the challenge, is that everybody says that they're customer-centric, except when you ask customers, and I always look at people. If I want to talk customer experience, I need to get the customer's experience so that I can then reverse engineer it inside of an organizational strategy. There's just a big disconnect, and executives and also shareholders and the board are equally guilty. They look at all of this stuff as cost centers, when in fact, I look at them as investments in the future of the organization, not just the health, but the ability to compete in a digital economy that's constantly evolving. So it's a mindset. It really is just a mindset. They do not see this as an opportunity that they jump in with both feet and say, let's do this now, whatever it takes to compete, because it's pushing against so many norms and so many conventions that it's easier not to do those things. It's easier to implement technologies in very strategic ways to sort of iterate now. But as we're seeing, the consumer, whether it's B2B, B2C, whatever, we could talk about any industry, it's all the same thing. It's just that people are learning how to interact with information differently, whether it's they use an Uber, or whether it's because they have an incredible finance app or a healthcare app. what's happening is those are spilling into other industries. Why isn't my insurance like this? Why isn't my healthcare like this? Why isn't my business like this or my bank? So I think the best thing that we can do is shift a mindset, executive mindset, to say, listen, what we're going to do is maybe cost some money. And maybe it's going to impact the bottom line for the next quarter, 2 quarters, or 3 quarters, but we're not competing quarter to quarter as much as we are competing for the future and the livelihood of this business, because everything is changing.
Well, that's a great point. I often will say to executive, when they say, how much does it cost? And I'll say, what does it cost if we don't do it? It's going to cost more, right? And to your point about the customers and how they want everything to be their best experience, from Uber to Amazon, we call this the omni-channel experience. Right. We do a lot of work at Kofax with banks and insurance companies and various institutions. It's called onboarding. And so the customer may start in the office, they fill something out, and then they want to get an update on their tablet device, and then maybe they want to send information, use their smartphone and capture an ID or like their W-2 statement to refinance a mortgage. And they don't want to think, well, wait a minute, I started in this channel, I have to stay in this channel. Wherever it's convenient, anywhere, anytime, is what they want to be able to do, and that to them is defining the customer experience that you have to deliver.
Yeah, well, I think you can't define the customer experience any other way, yet a lot of companies, it's just like digital transformation, it's a me-first definition to all of this, a me-first approach, when in fact it has to be an outside-in approach, right? What is the customer's experience? Well, you can only define it as the experience that a customer has with your company in each touch point, in each moment, and in the sum of those moments. That is the customer experience. Can't define it any other way. So the question is, what are you doing to shape that experience? A customer's going to have an experience whether you design it or not. And the thing about experiences is that, and believe it or not, I had to study this. The thing about experience is that we don't actually have a working definition in business for what experience means. So I had to write a whole book about it, but experience is an emotion. You're going to feel something in a moment. And that moment can be measured, that experience could be measured in what you feel and sense and what you do next. Because the best and the worst experiences become memories. And that is why living in a connected society, in a digital economy where everyone is influencing everyone else, experiences matter more than ever. And so to your point about ROI, of not doing anything, I used to say, what's the ROI if the I stands for ignorance?
Right, I like that.
And it's a fantastic approach, because I think a lot of us, when we're looking at it from a cost perspective, it's just natural, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at it as an investment opportunity, you can actually tie real numbers to this. There are customers that you're actually not reaching today simply because you are not part of the decision-making cycle. So what if you were? What would that look like to transcend investments into return? And I think we have to, I say the best change agents are a handful of things. One is they're sort of this business analyst, but they're also, you have to collect the data that presents a case. So you also have to be a lawyer to present the case for what an investment can do, why this is critical, but also why this is an opportunity. You also have to be a politician, because you have to get people, you have stakeholders, you have to get cross-functional groups together. And then you also have to be a cheerleader, because it's really hard, and you have to pep yourself up and everyone else every single day.
You know, that reminds me, Brian, this morning at Inspire 2017 in your keynote, you talked about everyone can be a change agent. I thought that was really interesting. You just described different excuse me, roles that they have to play. What do you see as the model for somebody seizing hold of trying to change the company and how they build that momentum?
You know, this is probably the most important question that I think we're not answering in every industry around the world. Change is about people. Digital transformation is about change, right? So it really does come down to people. A lot of this is psychological. Change agents, some of them are reluctant change agents, some of them are type A personalities, and they just go for it, and they just barrel through doors. But I think the most common thing that they all share is that it's just hard to change people's minds. And what this really is about is changing people's minds without telling them they have to change their minds, because that puts people on the defensive. What we're really talking about doing is getting people to see that this is an opportunity of which they can play a role in. So everybody has a role in digital transformation. Change agents' job is to turn other people into leaders, because without leadership, we're not going to be able to change anything. And most of the time, this happens in the middle. It works its way up because you can't really change without top-down support and executive sponsorship and eventually executive leadership. But you do have to create momentum within the organization, and you have to, unfortunately, demonstrate ROI, and you have to do this in pockets, and you have to show KPIs of progress and that this is the right thing to do. And once change agents are able to start demonstrating successes, even in the smallest of instances, it has a wonderful way of sort of spilling out in all kinds of things, whether it's a cross-functional steering committee, whether it's a spin out of an innovation center. But either way, it has to start with someone who doesn't necessarily know or believe that it's their job to do so. But what I wanted to communicate today was that it could be anybody from anywhere, as long as you believe and you're passionate about what it is that is changing, and you can demonstrate that it's in the best interest of the organization and your colleagues to do so. Then if there's resistance to that, then maybe you're not in the right place. But it's the right thing to do.
Well, that makes sense, and I really relate to that, Brian, because I've often said to people, don't worry if somebody's title is a VP or SVP or whatever it might be. That's just the organizational leadership designation. It's not the actual leadership of change. And so anybody can be that change agent, as you're saying, and they can get people to have followership because they see a better way to serve customers, and so people can get behind that. And I always say, watch out for the irresistible force, because you better clear a path. It sounds like you're finding that at companies.
I like that. Yeah, one of the things I've also observed, and I'd love to hear your take on this, is executives might even have, or even managers might even have, the best intentions for digital transformation, but whether they know it or not, they sort of get in the way. And I can tell you that sitting in meetings, I'll hear anything from let's think outside the box or let's brainstorm. But what that does is it takes someone out of a box and just puts them in another box, because we haven't necessarily changed the rules, right? We're not really democratizing ideas. We're not really democratizing sort of the ability to bring about change from the organization. We still are victims of the highest paid person in the room syndrome, where people will say, well, those are good ideas, but whether or not I agree with them as the person in the room is sort of going to dictate how you feel as a participant in that meeting, and also what we do next. And I think that the best thing executives could do is maybe get out of the way, because there are people in the organization today that have answers, that are the people they're trying to reach, but they don't have a voice. And once we start to see those voices become clearer and they actually are heard, you'll create a culture, because on a side note, culture is the #1 catalyst and the #1 inhibitor for digital transformation. But you can build a culture of listening, which then begets empathy, which then begets participation from the greater organization. And once you have a culture for support and change and empowerment, anything's possible. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think the same thing. Leaders have a natural tendency, they have to always dominate and be, the first one and have the answer. And if they can just kind of step aside. I've worked for a lot of CEOs in my career, and once said, I don't find these team meetings of value. And another executive says, well, it's because you talk 80% of the time. So the key thing is to listen at least 80% of the time and let others out. And I love that, just championing somebody. Talk a little bit about how you build on those small victories, and you can create the groundswell.
One of the change agents that I'm inspired by, his name is David Bray with the FCC, and he started as the CIO of the organization, but he's sort of become a change agent in that he's trying to bring about human empowerment throughout his organization. And so he's found very interesting ways that have changed what IT even means within the organization today. And it's very interesting in that when digital transformation really starts to get momentum, and besides it being cross-functional, it also redefines what the role of IT is in the company. So you still have information technology management, you still have sort of support and service, but you also have where in the CIO role where the I becomes innovation, and the CIO can become a partner to sort of expedite and accelerate and transform every facet of the organization. So I'm just curious to see how you're seeing the evolution of technology within the company in its digital transformation.
Well, I see that there's a lot of resistance to change, and so as you said, you can put the right technology, you need people, and you need process. And if you can get the people engaged across the organization, you have to have the vision, what good looks like, and current state versus future state. We help companies get to that future state of digital transformation. But at the end of the day, no matter what technology you have or what processes you create or revise, you've got to have people driving to the end goal. One of the things I'm most impressed about is your prolific writing. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about your new book. Just share some of the highlights for us.
Oh yeah, well thank you for that. It's called X, The Experience When Business Meets Design. And the letter X was inspired by the fact that there are several trends within the organization today that are either customer experience, employee experience, user experience, brand experience, and what they all share, in the BX, UX, CX, is the letter X. And I thought that all these things together are really about defining the experience you want people to have and share. And most businesses actually couldn't tell you what the experience should be in a touch point. They're just mostly designed to be transactional. It'd be efficient, maybe carry you to the next step. But because technology is becoming so human, we now have to design for those emotions. We have to design against those expectations and preferences and aspirations. And so what I wanted to do was help organizations and leaders and anybody really see what's possible when you rethink what an experience could be, and then use technology to facilitate and enable those experiences. And I thought it was ironic in that I was writing a book about designing meaningful experiences in a digital economy, and so I challenged myself to say, well, what could a book be? Obviously we still need books, but what could a book be for someone who expects a digital experience? Or at least a sense, whether they know it or not, when they're on their device, they're changing how they process information, how they interact with information. And so I took a lot of really interesting, ran a lot of interesting studies, everything from how long is an attention span to how do you interact with information, how do you find information, how do you retain information, and I have to tell you, what I thought was going to be a short, just side step to research this took 3.5 years.
Really?
And I'll tell you though that the insights that came out of that, I took those insights and applied it to paper. And what was just fascinating is that all of the standards that we hold, I had to unlearn them in order to reimagine. For example, we don't need a table of contents in a linear format anymore. Our brains actually don't work that way.
Sure.
The chapter infrastructure could also be reinvented. Sentence structure could also be reimagined to really engage people the way that their attention spans are engaging. And also paragraphs can be translated into visualizations, of which challenge every aspect of, I had to relearn and unlearn a lot of things. But the book process itself then lent itself to experience design. The book is an experience and a physical metaphor for how we could reimagine and question everything around that we hold as the standard to deliver better experiences for people that we don't necessarily know as well as we should.
Well, that sounds pretty cool, Brian. I can't wait to read my copy. I can't promise whether I'll finish it all on paper. I might start here in Nashville, and then I'll read the rest of it electronically on the plane. But thanks for talking digital transformation with me today, Brian.
Oh, Grant, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.